Welcome to VidZette, your home for careful consideration of our common concerns. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. And please note about mic check, whether you hear me well or not. If there are any audio problems, let's just say it's been an interesting afternoon. I was going to talk about Hillary Clinton's latest screed, and believe me, she is the gift that keeps on giving. But Kavanaugh has occupied my day. One of the problems that comes with making commentary is sometimes you have to sit and watch 1,000 hours of something else that you really would rather not watch. But let's talk a little bit about the Kavanaugh hearing. Basic issue here is that this is a political process. It is part of the Senate's advice and consent. That is, the Senate has to agree to a Supreme Court nominee. They can block him the way Robert Bork was blocked by voting against him, or like Abe Fortas when he was to be elevated to the chief judgeship. He was blocked, but those were votes against. And notice it's a vote. It's not a jury. It's the Senate. And what we have is a situation where we have to ask, is the American idea of innocent until proven guilty actually real? Because what we've seen from the Democrats is a simple case of obstruct, 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 and oh, we're going to change the rules. You are guilty until proven innocent. Okay? That's simply not the way it works. Not the way it's going to work, not the way it ever works. Aha. Give me just a second. I saw something with lighting. Be right back. You did not need to see that glow off my dome. In any case, the issue here is, do we honor the American ideal of innocent until proven guilty? And while we don't need a clear and a beyond a reasonable doubt standard to approve or not approve, what we really should have is at least a preponderance of evidence. And what happened this morning was Christine Blasey Ford got up there and told a story. Now, when all is said and done, it's quite clear that she believes her story. Don't get me wrong. She believes it. And that's really all a lie detector tells you, is that someone believes what they're saying. And even that is not 100% reliable, but it happens. And she got up, and in the morning, she sounded convincing. Then Judge Kavanaugh got up, and he did exactly what he needed to do. He came out with righteous indignation about his life being destroyed by a false accusation. He never once pointed a finger at Dr. Ford and said, no, she's lying. What he did was say, the story's not true. And there's a big difference here. If she believes she's telling the truth, she's not lying, even if her story is false. And when we look at stories, we find a lot of things happen. For example, a lot of experiments have been done looking at eyewitnesses to an event. And then there are a set of questions charged to them. And you'll find eyewitnesses within 30 or 40 minutes will give contradictory testimony. No, it was a red car, it was a blue car, or, run the list. All sorts of things. But it gets even more problematic because it was 30 years from the alleged incident until she first told somebody about it in her counseling session. And in essence, what you're dealing with is someone who's bringing up what's called repressed memories. And we know that repressed memories are a minefield. Does anybody happen to remember a case called the Fells Acres Daycare? Fells Acres was a daycare in New England someplace. I think it was Massachusetts. And in 1986, All of the principals at Fells Acres Daycare were charged with all sorts of sex crimes against the little kiddies. And the little kiddies were taken off by themselves, and interviewers went through all kinds of stuff, and the kiddies end up telling these fantastic stories that were simply not possible. And ultimately, people were convicted and sent to prison. Work was done, lots of effort, and eventually these people were exonerated, because what had happened was the questioners, by the way they questioned, they planted memories. The work on repressed memories is just as awful. And we know that memory doesn't work perfectly. So when you look at someone over a long period of time, their memory has changed. And we know, for example, that Judge Kavanaugh didn't run in the same circles with Dr. Ford. So the chance of them meeting for something like this wasn't very big. And as we look at this thing, we have to take a look at some details. First detail. Now, Dianne Feinstein argues that nobody in her office leaked, that somehow Dr. Ford told her friends and her friends leaked to the press. Let's just say that's not very credible. And I would welcome an ethics investigation against Feinstein, hopefully to get her thrown off the committee. But that's another story. In any case, what we have is someone who believed a story that quite easily could have been embellished, changed, amplified, whatever else, by her long lapse and then trying to put stories together to make sense. And one of the things that the mind does is that it tries to make sense of things. It's really common to see an observer discount something that makes no sense. The mind is designed to process in a way to make things make sense, not to tape record it. There was a TV show called Brain Games a while back, little half-hour shows, and they showed a whole bunch of these different things, how you would play tricks on your mind. And it was very common to see that people who thought they saw something but it didn't make sense would actually not even remember the little item that didn't make sense. And they would substitute something that did make sense and say that's what they saw, when in fact, if they were shown it later, they go, that's not what I saw, that's different. Yes, it is what you saw. So memory is highly fallible. But what's interesting is Kavanaugh walked in and he had calendars. And it's amazing. You know, God looks out for good people sometimes, and I don't know that he knew why he was doing it, but he had detailed information that said, I was here doing this, and this is the way we did things, so that I was never at a party. Yes, I drank. Well, I had a weak stomach, and so after about, he didn't say 3 beers, but it didn't take him a whole lot to be throwing up. Of course, when you're a teenager, you know, that's part of the deal. If you're one of those wild ones, you know, crazy types. And so this is what they did. Yes, he drank, but he never drank to a point where he could not remember. And part of that is he had a weak stomach. He threw up before he ever got there. But you look at his calendar, and his calendar had him busy the entire time. And every time when there was opening where he could have gone to a party like the one that was listed by Dr. Ford, he was someplace else. It just didn't happen. So ultimately, he had a whole bunch of evidence. And then when we look at Dr. Ford, everyone she claimed was there stated under oath that they weren't there. So what are you going to do? You got all of these people contradicting Dr. Ford's story. So if we look at it, we say Dr. Ford has a story. Judge Kavanaugh has evidence. What does that mean? Judge Kavanaugh clearly is the one that should be believed. Once again, that doesn't mean Dr. Ford doesn't believe her story. Just her story has errors. And as the final questioner in the hearing said, is she incorrect? And the answer is she may have had a sexual assault of some sort, but with regard to me, the story is not correct. He never called her a liar. He was very polite about her. And I thought one thing early on was incredibly powerful, and that was that his 10-year-old daughter said, "We need to pray for the woman." That tells you something about what Judge Kavanaugh's been teaching his kids. He's a good man. The Senate has been acting like a railroad station. One other item that's really important in this whole thing, or actually, there's a couple. The Democrats kept pushing for FBI interviews. And there's a process. The FBI doesn't, if there's a question, the FBI does interviews. They get witness statements and hand them on. President gets them, hands them to the committee. Now the committee looks at the witness statements and says, okay, we need to find out more. They send their investigators out to get more questions, more answers, and bring that back to the committee. Well, the Democrats kept wanting to back up 2 steps to the FBI when the committee investigators already had the witness statements and they were chasing them down. So the FBI thing is a total talking point, and everybody on the committee knew it. Had no basis anywhere in fact. Finally, we talked about this before. Dianne Feinstein violated due process rights for Dr. Ford. It's very clear she had the letter long before it was released. She even interviewed Dr. Ford in her office privately after she had the letter and said nothing. That's called a guilty mind, or in legal terms, mens rea. She knows she's lying. She says, oh no, none of my staff would have leaked. We know Democrat staffs leak like sieves. Oh, she gave an explanation to John Cornyn, which was, well, Dr. Ford told some of her friends and maybe they told the media. Dr. Ford didn't want her name out. She would have told her friends, you keep this quiet. It was Feinstein's office that did it, and I'd love to see her up on an ethics complaint, see this fully investigated, and have her thrown off the committee. But if you believe that's going to happen, I have some swampland to sell you down here in Florida. Let's see what the comments say. It was search and destroy. That comment was there at one time. She is a psychologist, works for the CIA. I don't know about the CIA part. Yes, she's a PhD in psychology. She, of all people, should know that memory studies show that memory is highly malleable. By the way, the word malleable means it can be bent. Not a single piece of evidence. Her brother works for Fusion GPS. I've seen that. I've also seen denials of that. And under a lot of stress, if you looked at her, you saw just fear and intimidation. And the question is, why would she be so fearful? Give me a break, lady. You went through a PhD dissertation defense. That's a fearful operation. You are now a professor and you're called to be the strong voice in front of your class. No, lady, you got something else going on. I just don't believe you. The hearing didn't change partisan minds, but as an independent voter, this should make them sick. I agree. And here's a key point on it. There's a fellow named Jeff Flake who sits on the committee. If he votes in her favor, and I'm thinking he will, this is a done deal because Murkowski and Collins will come right along and he'll make it clear to them, look, he has tons of evidence. All of the evidence contradicts her story. Sorry, this is the way it goes. We need you on our side. And it should go through. All right. Got to be the greatest granddad ever here. My grandkids are a little bit of liars, but I'll take it. Okay. I was originally going to talk about Hillary Clinton's screed. And I've got, as you can tell, I've got way too many pages of notes on this. She is indeed the gift that keeps on giving. She wrote a piece in the Atlantic magazine on the 16th of September. And it's kind of been lost in the Kavanaugh noise, but my question when I looked at it is, okay, Hillary, how many lies can you tell in one sentence? Well, she may not have got them all in one sentence, but if we look at the second paragraph, she starts talking about unspeakable cruelty of Trump separating parents from their kids at the border. Fact check first. The minority of families that are separated at the border are actually families. Most of them are bringing kids across to look like families. Two. Got to get the right number of fingers up. You get older, you know, 1, 2, 3. Got to make sure you can count right. Think about what those parents have done. They have dragged little kids across, all the way across from Guatemala to Mexico to wherever, exposing those kids to, particularly the girls, to rape by the coyotes, that is the smugglers. And now we're going to worry about separating them? Oh, and by the way, the kids are separated into facilities that are really quite plush. And Trump is between a rock and a hard place because he's got one court that says you can't keep the kids with the parents, and another one that says things like you can't get them. Let me make sure I get this right here. At any rate, I didn't write it down, so I won't speak it badly. But basically, there are two court opinions that put him and put them against each other. There's not much he can do. In the second paragraph, still, she talks about monstrous neglect of Puerto Rico. That's after Hurricane Maria. Did anybody bother to tell Hillary that Puerto Rico is an island? Trains can't run across 1,000 miles of ocean. Trains don't get stuff there quickly. You have to load up boats, take them to boats, unload them. The port facilities were initially destroyed. So you had to do some rebuilding there, get stuff ashore. And oh, by the way, the mayor of San Juan is as corrupt as the day is long. We still have, after many, many months, relief supplies sitting on the airport in San Juan, where they were delivered but not distributed. You have an incredibly corrupt Democrat organization down there that run the island as their own little fiefdom. And because of that, the power grid in Puerto Rico was in terrible shape. And so when the hurricane came through, it probably did them a good thing by wiping out the power grid. So it had to be rebuilt up to good standards. But that meant 90+% of the island was without power for quite some time. And remember, did I say Puerto Rico's an island? Yeah. You have to run a ship down there with supplies again and again, many ships. And Trump's been very vigorous on it. You run airplanes with stuff that'll fit on airplanes. So he supplies food that way. But ultimately, she's just flat lying. Okay. Oh, the other fun one is the lie about 3,000 people dead with the hurricane because of his neglect. No. This is a great piece of lying. The reports that have the number of 3,000 more or less are 6-month surveys. So they look at the mortality in the island over 6 months. They don't look at it over the time of the hurricane and the couple of weeks afterwards. And over that period, you look at the vital statistics, you look at death certificates, and there were 15 or 20 people died. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a very small number. Obviously, you don't want any to die, but the fact is it wasn't 3,000 that Hillary's lying along with the rest of the Dems. Still in paragraph 2. Do I sense a pattern here? Despite recent indictments of several Russian military intelligence officers for hacking the DNC in 2016, he continues to dismiss a serious attack on our country by a foreign power as a hoax. No, Hillary, That is a lie. He has flat out said on multiple occasions that Russian hacking is a bad deal. We need to work to stop it. They need to stop it. That's it. What he called a hoax was the investigation that was cooked up to protect you from charges on your email stuff and divert FBI attention to him. This is a classic Democrat ploy. Throw the two things together. Don't worry about anything that is the slightest bit subtle or requires critical thinking. Throw them together, try to make them stick. Quote, his purpose is to confound us. No, Hillary, that's your purpose. The more you can confuse and distract, the longer you can evade justice and Democrats can stay in power. Which brings me back to Kavanaugh. You realize why the Democrats are so afraid of Kavanaugh. It's a very, very simple thing. Kavanaugh represents total destruction for the idea of using the courts to achieve legislative goals that they cannot get by legislative means. And he actually believes in the rule of law, and law is what the written words mean in the eyes of the people who wrote them. Russian interference, she says, Trump stood by. No, Trump's been working on it. Obama told the FBI to quit looking. Oh, then she screams about voter suppression. Give me a beep break. There's no voter suppression in the United States. None. Voter identification is actually a way to increase Black and other minority turnout. It's been proven again and again. When you have the ID, you know you can vote, and you know that your vote may be counted when you can't have an illegal who doesn't have the ID voting. It's not a perfect answer, but it's a darn good one. It increases minority voting. The Democrats should be celebrating it. Instead, they want a talking point. She talks about breathtaking corruption in Trump's administration. We've lost 2 cabinet members because they got a little bit, shall we say, privileged. They're gone. She really wants us to forget about the Clinton Family Crime Foundation. And then she says that he's profiting from being the president. Correction. Trump's net worth has dropped roughly in half since he's been president. She tried to make the deal of people staying in his hotels was making him rich. No, Trump made most of his money actually from licensing. And she was objecting to him not putting him into blind trust. Well, she doesn't want us to remember the news conference when he brought stacks of paper and said, look, I can't put it in a blind trust. What I do is transfer management to these people, and that's that. And that's close to the same thing, but legally it's different because the actual process of selling assets would make him sell things at fire sale prices, and that was just a bad idea. She talks about Trump separating us. Doesn't want us to remember Black Lives Matter and Antifa, who are actively separating us. Remember, on racism, the Republicans don't bring up race. The Democrats do. Here's the fundamental part. The Democrats do not regard Trump as a legitimate president. But more than that, they don't regard their political opposition as legitimate human beings. I'm not overstating the case. Remember rules for radical. You have to isolate the subject. Part of that is you dehumanize them. You call them a Nazi. You don't say President Trump. You say Nazi's a Nazi. He's Hitler. If someone doesn't agree with me, they call me a liar, or they will call me a racist. They're not willing to engage me in the discussion. Big Twitter discussion I've had in the last 2 days. I've got a black rapper who is calling me a liar because Snopes had a reporter try to debunk my piece on Hillary's health. It's obvious he didn't watch and he didn't notice that I said, here's how to prove me wrong. And I even pointed them to the differential diagnosis document. They don't like dealing with ideas. They want to dehumanize us. They want us to be things. Then it doesn't matter if they beat us up. If you're people, you can't do that. Let's see what else we've got. In ultimate form, the progressives don't like we the people. And remember, the preamble to the Constitution says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, etc. We the people. They disagreed, but they did it together. The left wants we the government. And that separates the left actually into two groups. You have the people on the top. Anybody heard of a guy named Hugo Chavez or Nicolas Maduro? Those people are the ones on the top. Very rich. They have no problems. And everybody down below is a serf. And they are the useful idiots. So the left side, the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter, they claim they want something good. But what happens is the Democrats in Congress consider them useful idiots to stir the pot, to make people think there's something real wrong that the Democrats are the only ones who can solve, while never, ever solving anything. Instead, it's if you have the problem, you need the Democrat, instead of saying, we're going to make America great again by getting rid of problems. All right, let's look at some comments here. Dr. Ford lives next door to Google, and with her being a doctor who teaches class about being abused. Okay. Yeah, Trump flakes a never Trumper. The San Juan mayor is under investigation for fraud now. Okay, that's going to be interesting. Yeah, and I don't know who this is thinking I'm gay, but no. Ask my wife about that. And all right, are there any questions we can deal with here? We got a couple of minutes. I don't see any other comments at the moment. This has been a crazy day, a crazy week. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be with you last week, but we were traveling in Oregon, and I have to admit my golf game got in the way. But I'm back, and I think you like this camera better than the one on my laptop. Are these people who are threatening and assaulting Trump supporters going to continue to walk free like they did what they did to Ted Cruz? For the time being, a lot of those will probably walk free. And if any of you missed the news, Cruz is going to dinner with his family, and a bunch of protesters came into the restaurant and shouted and raised enough ruckus that he left. I think the proper answer would have been for one of his family or the restaurant to call 911 to have these people arrested. But remember, DC is 90+% Democrat, so they probably wouldn't do that. Maybe if Cruz's wife had done it, they might have come to do something. But for the time being, we're not going to see much of that. I think what's happening is that the Democrats are getting louder and louder because people are tuning them out. Why hasn't Congress prevented this type of tragedy from developing in appointments for justice? I think part of the problem is that you don't have a set of ironclad rules that says, here's the cutoff date. If you're going to bring anything to this committee, it comes by this date. We have a chance to deal with it. And I was impressed that Charles Grassley actually did quite a good job managing the committee. And I have a feeling that the committee may be revising their rules before long so that you don't end up with this massive obstructionism and character assassination. What about defamation of character? Is it a law? Here's the problem with this. Libel and slander are knowing false statements about someone. But when you talk about someone who is a public figure, such as Judge Kavanaugh, the president, on and on, the laws on libel and slander are very much looser because vigorous public debate requires the ability to say things. And as a result, libel and slander are very hard to prosecute against a senator, against a judge, etc. Now, members of his family, if something came against them, they're not the public figures, and they could be prosecuted. But let's suppose, for example, that Judge Kavanaugh is confirmed, he's on the high court, and he prosecutes a case and wins it for defamation against the Democrats. The problem you've got now is, what are his damages? What do you get? The court would probably award him $1 and simply say, you won, but you have no damages. I'm going to order Dianne Feinstein to pay you $1. And it's what we call a Pyrrhic victory, where you go in, you win the victory, but you're so badly damaged it does you no good. So it's one of those why bother circumstances. Leftist fascist protesters have been given over to delusion. Absolutely correct. And here's a problem that they have. The reality testing is totally wrong. And one of the problems you get in trying to reach them is that they simply don't see evidence. I did a video on this a while back. You may look it up on the channel, titled, "Can You Talk to Your Neighborhood Liberal?" And one of my conclusions in that video is all you can do is hit them with a one-sentence soundbite. And one of the classics is, "Oh, you're giving all those tax cuts to the rich." To which I say, when's the last time a poor man gave you a job? It's quick, to the core, and might get through. I mean, there are 100 of others. I'm not the ultimate one, and we probably need to be dealing with a whole lot of these little sound bites, because the more our candidates are able to use these against the left, the better off we are, because people will go, oh yeah, that's true. Okay, leftist fascist protesters. Yeah, okay, that was professors. Cruz's attackers were merely following Mad Maxine Waters' instructions. Let me hit one little item, and then I'll call the half hour up. We've run over a couple of minutes. It has been shown quite recently that people who take all of those social justice warrior underwater basket weaving courses are having a hard time finding employment. And it should be very simple to extrapolate from that and say, oh, all of those student loans that aren't being repaid, maybe a lot of those are coming from underwater basket weaving majors. How about we write a rule that says a school that has a program which has, let's say, 25% default rate. The national average is 11%. 25% default rate. That program can no longer have any students with federally insured student loans. What do you think would happen with all those lefty professors? Oh, they're teaching these social justice warfare classes, but their students can't get hired. They can't get paid. Until next time, put that one on the list. We'll talk about it some more. Thanks for watching. Please remember to support VidZette on Patreon. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, because that's where all the announcements come. And until next time, I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.